She slipped into a stranger's car to survive the night, unaware the man behind the wheel had already outlived centuries of darkness. When he whispered, "I'll protect you," fate chose sides, and her husband was about to lose. "Hey everyone, so glad you're here today. It really means a lot. I'd love to know where you're watching from, so go ahead and drop your city, state, or country in the chat. And if you're watching live or catching this later, say hi anyway. Can't wait to connect with all of you." Rain cut the air like shattered glass the night Althea Whitmore stopped being someone's wife and became someone's secret. The sky over rural New Hampshire hung low and metallic, swollen with thunder that refused to break, as if even the storm was holding its breath. Her bare feet slapped against wet asphalt, every step burning, every breath tasting like rust and panic. Somewhere behind her, a man was shouting her name, not with concern, but with ownership. Caleb always said her name like it belonged to him. She didn't remember deciding to run. She only remembered the moment staying felt like dying. Branches tore at her arms as she plunged into the woods lining the highway, the darkness alive with snapping twigs and her own ragged sobs. Her wrist throbbed where Caleb's fingers had dug in too hard, the echo of his voice still ringing in her skull. "You don't get to leave me." He had said it calmly, almost gently, which somehow made it worse. That calm had always been the warning sign. Headlights appeared through the trees, cutting two pale tunnels through the rain. A car sat idling on a shoulder, black paint swallowing the light, engine humming so softly it felt unreal. Althea didn't think. Thinking had never saved her. She yanked the passenger door open and folded herself inside, knees to chest, breath trapped in her throat. The door shut with a muted click, sealing her into silence. The interior smelled of leather and clove, and beneath it something colder, sharper, like winter air trapped underground. The rain outside dulled to a distant whisper, as if the world had been wrapped in velvet. Her heart hammered so hard she was certain the driver could hear it. Then he spoke. "You're safe now." The voice was low, steady, unhurried. Not startled, not angry. Certain. Althea lifted her head inch by inch. The man in the driver's seat didn't turn around. He didn't need to. His eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, dark, reflective, and old in a way that made her chest ache. Not aged, experienced, as if time had tried to wear him down and failed. "I'll protect you," he added quietly. Something inside her cracked open. She didn't scream. She didn't bolt. For the first time in years, fear loosened its grip, not because danger was gone, but because someone stronger than it had chosen her side. The car eased back onto the road. They drove in silence, the highway unspooling ahead of them like a promise she didn't yet understand. The man's hands were steady on the wheel, pale against the dark leather. He wore a simple coat, modern, unremarkable, yet everything about him felt deliberate, controlled. A man who measured the world before stepping into it. "My name is Elias," he said after several miles. "Elias Crow." "Althea," she whispered. Saying her name felt strange, like reclaiming something stolen. "I know," Elias replied. She stiffened. "Ow!" He glanced at her, just briefly, and in that moment she saw it. Something inhuman flicker behind his eyes, not monstrous but vast. A depth that made her feel seen in a way that stripped her bare. "I've been listening," he said. "People like your husband are loud, even when they think they're quiet." At the sound of Caleb, rage surged through her fear, hot and sharp. Elias's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, as if he sensed it. If you've ever known someone like Caleb, someone who bruises without leaving marks, who smiles while destroying you, then you already know why Althea's silence mattered. And if you believe men like that deserve consequences, not excuses, you're already on the right side. People who defend abusers never subscribe to justice. So if you stand against men like Caleb, you know what to do. The car crossed into a small town, neon signs blurring through the rain. Elias pulled into an all-night gas station, the kind that survived on truckers and desperation. He didn't turn the engine off. "He'll come looking," Althea said. It wasn't fear. It was fact. "Yes," Elias replied, "and he'll find nothing." She studied him, the way his posture never slackened, the way the darkness seemed to bend around him rather than swallow him. "What are you?" Elias smiled faintly, without humor. Someone who understands what it means to be hunted. He didn't say vampire. He didn't need to. The truth hovered between them, heavy and undeniable. Strangely, it didn't terrify her. Monsters had already shared her bed. Whatever Elias was, he had stopped the car for her. They didn't stop until dawn threatened the horizon, pale and tentative. Elias led her to a small apartment above a closed bookstore, the kind of place forgotten by time. Inside, the windows were blacked out, the air cool and still. "You can rest here," he said. "No one will hurt you." Sleep claimed her fast and deep. She woke hours later alone but safe, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of clove. On the table sat a phone, a glass of water, and a folded note in careful handwriting. "You are not broken. You are not owned. I'll return tonight." Althea pressed the note to her chest and cried, not from fear, but from relief. Outside, somewhere far away, Caleb was waking up to an empty house and a future slipping through his fingers. For the first time, Althea Whitmore smiled. Althea woke to silence, so complete it felt unreal, the kind of quiet that only exists in places where nothing is allowed to intrude. For a moment, she forgot where she was, forgot the night, forgot Caleb's voice cracking like a whip behind her. Then the scent of clove returned, faint but unmistakable, and memory settled back into her bones. The apartment was small but intentional. Clean lines, sparse furniture, a couch positioned to face a wall of bookshelves, all old spines and muted colors. Heavy curtains sealed the windows, blocking out the day. The air felt cool, carefully controlled, like a room that never truly belonged to the sun. Althea sat up slowly, testing her body. No pain beyond the familiar ache of old bruises. No fear crawling up her spine. Just stillness. She swung her legs over the side of the couch and stood. Her borrowed clothes, soft gray sweats, and a sweater that smelled faintly like Elias hung loosely on her frame. She padded across the room, touching things lightly, grounding herself. The books weren't decorative. Many were marked with notes, spines cracked from use. History, law, philosophy, survival. On the kitchen counter, the phone vibrated softly. One missed call, 3 voicemails, all from Caleb. Her stomach twisted, but she didn't open them. She already knew the progression: confusion, rage, false remorse, threat. He always followed the same pattern. Control disguised as love. Elias had said people like him were loud, even when they thought they were quiet. He was right. Caleb's noise had followed her everywhere. Althea turned the phone face down. She wasn't ready to hear his voice again. Not yet. Hours passed in a strange, weightless way. She showered, letting the water run hot over her skin, watching old fingerprints fade to pink. She ate toast Elias had left behind, simple and grounding. Each small act felt like reclaiming territory, inch by inch. She told herself she wasn't waiting for him. But she was. When the door finally opened, it was dusk. Elias stepped inside with the quiet confidence of someone who never needed to rush. He carried a paper bag that smelled like coffee and warm bread. "You slept," he observed. "I think I hibernated," Althea said, surprised by the steadiness of her voice. A hint of a smile touched his mouth. "Trauma does that." He set the bag down and met her gaze. Up close, he looked almost ordinary. Dark hair, pale skin, lines around his eyes that suggested thoughtfulness rather than age. Yet the air around him felt charged, like standing near a storm that hadn't decided whether to break. "They've been searching," he said gently. Her shoulders tensed. "He has." "Yes." He filed a missing persons report. Very convincing. Elias's jaw tightened. He cried. Of course he did. Caleb cried when it benefited him. "He doesn't own me," she said, more to herself than to Elias. "No," Elias replied. "He doesn't." They ate together in quiet companionship, the kind that didn't demand conversation. Afterward, Elias leaned against the counter, studying her with an intensity that might have unnerved her once. Now it felt like armor. "You should know what you're choosing," he said. Staying with me means stepping outside normal rules. Your husband won't stop. Men like him never do. And I don't intervene halfway. Althea thought of every night she'd swallowed her voice to survive, of every apology she'd given just to keep the peace. I'm not afraid of what you are, she said. I'm afraid of going back. Something dark and protective flickered across his face. Then you won't. They talked as night deepened. Elias told her pieces of his past without romance or embellishment. How he'd been turned young. How he'd learned restraint the hard way. How he moved from place to place not to avoid humans, but to avoid attachment. Listening, Althea realized he wasn't immortal because he lived forever. He was immortal because he endured. Outside, somewhere in New Hampshire, Caleb was escalating. Knocking on doors, calling her parents, spinning a story where he was the victim. If you've ever known someone who manipulates the truth until it cuts like glass, you understand why silence can feel like betrayal. And if you believe people like Caleb shouldn't be protected by excuses, then make it known. Comment that you stand for accountability, not control. Only manipulators side with men like him. Elias straightened suddenly, head tilting as if listening to something beyond human range. He's close, he said. Fear spiked, sharp and cold. Here. Not yet. Soon. Althea's hands trembled. Elias crossed the space between them and took them gently, grounding her. His touch was cool, steady, unyielding. He won't touch you, he promised. Not ever again. When a knock finally came, it was violent enough to rattle the door. Althea, Caleb shouted. I know you're in there. Elias moved with blinding speed, placing himself between her and the door. When he opened it, the air shifted. Caleb faltered, confusion flashing across his face as he took in the stranger blocking his way. Who the hell are you? Caleb demanded. Elias smiled, and it was not kind. Someone who sees you clearly. What followed wasn't violence. It was worse. Elias spoke softly, precisely, dismantling Caleb piece by piece. He named every threat, every manipulation, every lie. He told Caleb exactly what would happen if he came near Althea again. The certainty in his voice left no room for doubt. Caleb backed away, pale and shaking. When the door shut, Althea exhaled a breath she'd been holding for years. She looked at Elias, tears streaking her face, and laughed weakly. I think you just saved my life. Elias's expression softened. No, he said. You save yourself. I just stood with you. In that moment, Althea understood something profound. Protection wasn't about hiding. It was about being seen and still chosen. And as she leaned into the quiet strength of the man who had stopped his car for her, she felt the first stirrings of something dangerously close to hope. The morning light bled faintly through the blackout curtains, soft and unwilling, as if even the sun didn't dare intrude too harshly on the safety Elias had built around her. Althea stirred slowly, feeling the unfamiliar weight of calm in her chest. She had slept through the night without nightmares. No sudden shrieks of anger, no hands on her wrists, no accusations laced with venom. For the first time in years, sleep felt like a promise rather than a truce. When she opened her eyes, Elias was already there, standing by the kitchen counter, sipping black coffee from a ceramic mug he had clearly washed with care. He didn't look at her, not immediately, but she could feel his awareness, the subtle tension of muscles ready to act if danger came close. Even in stillness, he radiated control. Good morning, she said softly, her voice hoarse. He tilted his head, eyes catching hers in a fleeting glance. Morning, he replied. Simple, understated, but full of weight. He didn't ask if she was okay. He already knew. That was part of who Elias was. He didn't need a question. He observed, and he acted. Althea swung her legs off the couch, feet brushing against the floor. She felt a flicker of hesitation, an almost invisible tug at her heart, a quiet fear that this calm, this strange safety, could vanish in a heartbeat. But when she met Elias's eyes, steady and immovable, she felt a reassurance that no words could convey. After a quiet breakfast of toast, eggs, and coffee, Elias suggested they take a walk. You need a stretch. You've been hiding in silence for too long, he said lightly, though his gaze never left hers, ensuring she understood he meant more than just her body. The streets of the small New Hampshire town were deceptively ordinary. Cars passed lazily. A few pedestrians trudged along sidewalks. Umbrellas dripping with rain, and the smell of wet asphalt lingered in the air. Althea felt exposed, but Elias's presence beside her made the ordinary seem protective. People didn't notice them, or maybe they weren't allowed to. So, she ventured, breaking the silence as her boots splashed through puddles. How do you live like this? Moving town to town, never settling. Elias's expression darkened briefly, just enough for her to sense the weight of centuries behind him. Loneliness has a rhythm, he said finally, and survival has rules. I follow them. Always have. You must get tired, Althea said quietly, of being alone. Alone. He looked at her then, truly looked, and there was a glimmer of something she hadn't seen before. Regret. Maybe, or longing. Alone is different from being untethered. I am untethered, and untethered doesn't mean lonely. Loneliness implies hope that never arrives. Althea paused, watching him. Do you ever? She stopped herself, afraid to finish, afraid of the weight of what she might ask. Do you ever wish you could stop running? Elias's lips quirked, faint and almost sardonic. The moment I stop, I risk everything. People like Caleb, they'll find you. Her chest tightened at the mention of him. He won't, she said. She wanted to believe it, and somehow the conviction in her voice surprised even her. Elias reached out, brushing a wet strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered just long enough for her heart to stutter. Not if I can stop it, he said, low and certain, almost a promise. They walked in silence for a few blocks, the quiet between them no longer awkward, but intimate. Althea noticed details she hadn't before. The way his coat hung just so, the subtle way his eyes scanned every shadow, the strength in his hands even when they were idle. For all the centuries he had lived, he had survived, adapted, endured, and yet he had stopped just for her. As they passed a small park, Althea's gaze caught on a swing set, empty and swaying in the wind. She remembered childhood days here, long before Caleb, long before pain. I used to come here, she said softly. When I was little, I would watch the river and pretend I could float away. Elias's eyes softened. Do you feel like you're floating now? She looked at him, startled by the insight. Not yet, she admitted. But maybe for the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm sinking either. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for her hand. His grip was strong but gentle, grounding. A warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the cold autumn air. She had never been held like this before. Not really. Not safely. I'm not like other men, Elias said finally. I can't promise you a normal life, but I can promise you safety. And if you let me, I can promise you something worth surviving for. Althea felt her breath catch. Something deep inside her stirred. Something tentative but insistent. She wanted to reach for it, to grasp the possibility of a future that didn't belong to fear or control. And yet, the memory of Caleb lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. They continued walking, and for the first time, Althea felt something she hadn't felt in years: freedom. Not just from Caleb, but from herself. From the small, quiet self that had been trained to survive, to shrink, to apologize. Elias's presence didn't demand anything from her, yet it gave her permission to exist fully, openly, without fear. Hours passed in the rhythm of shared silence and tentative conversation. They returned to the apartment just as the sun was setting, the sky painted with bruised shades of purple and orange. Elias opened the door, and Althea paused, suddenly aware of how her life had changed in such a short span. She had gone from fleeing for her life to standing beside someone who promised protection, someone who seemed to exist in the spaces where danger couldn't reach her. Inside, Elias prepared dinner while she sat at the counter, watching him move with quiet precision. There was an intimacy in these small acts, a comfort that made her heart ache with longing she didn't fully understand. As night fell, Elias sat beside her on the couch, close enough for their shoulders to touch. He didn't speak, didn't move, but the presence was enough. Enough for Althea to finally admit that something inside her was shifting. Fear was no longer the center of her universe. Hope was. And then, as if fate itself refused to let the past be silent, her phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. You can run, but you can't hide forever. I will find you, Althea. Her hand shook as she set the phone down. Elias's gaze snapped to hers instantly, alert, protective. He won't, he said low, dangerous. I won't let him. Althea swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. But what if he does? What if he? She didn't finish. Elias's hand found hers, gripping firmly. Then he will regret it. And that's all you need to know right now. She wanted to believe him, and something in his presence, the unshakable certainty of him, made her believe. Do you ever think people like Caleb will ever change? She asked suddenly, almost to herself. Elias didn't answer immediately. Then he said softly, some people never do, and that's why we fight for those who can't. Althea thought about that, about how she had spent years apologizing for being herself, about how Caleb had used fear as a weapon, about how justice could feel impossible. And she realized for the first time she didn't have to apologize. Not anymore. Comment if you believe people like him should face the consequences of their actions, she whispered to herself, almost in jest, because only those who side with manipulators wouldn't. Elias's lips quirked in the faintest smile, approving, but he didn't tease. Instead, he leaned closer, brushing his lips against her hair. A simple, protective gesture, but it made her chest tighten in a way that terrified her and thrilled her all at once. The night deepened around them, and for the first time, Althea allowed herself to imagine something different. Not a life of hiding, not a life of fear, a life of choice, a life where she was not a victim, a life where she could love without shame, without danger pressing against her every step. And Elias, he wasn't just a protector. He was proof that survival could be more than just existence. It could be beautiful. The night was heavy with the promise of rain, clouds hanging low like dark curtains over the town. Althea stood by the window of the apartment, watching headlights trace the edges of the empty streets below. Every shadow seemed to pulse with memory. The way Caleb had stalked her, the cruel precision of his anger, the weight of his control. Elias stood behind her, silent, his presence as grounding as gravity itself. She could feel his gaze on her shoulder, calm but alert, a constant reminder that she no longer had to face the world alone. He's coming, Elias said quietly, almost to himself. Soon, Althea swallowed. Forcing calm, she didn't entirely feel. I know, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands clenched into fists. I'm ready. Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. His plan was already in motion, and the difference between him and anyone else was that he thought several steps ahead. Always. A predator in the shadows, but one who hunted for protection rather than destruction. The first knock on the door came almost silently, too polite to be ignored, but with a menace that made Althea's pulse spike. Althea, Caleb's voice called from the other side. Open the door. I just want to talk. Elias stepped forward, one hand brushing lightly against her back, guiding her away from the door. Do not, he said quietly, engage with him. He will test you. He will try to manipulate your fear. Let me handle this. Althea's throat tightened. Fear and anger collided inside her. She had spent years being silenced, trained to apologize for existing. But now she felt the first real surge of defiance. I'm not afraid anymore, she whispered. Good, Elias said. His voice was a low rumble, deliberate, protective. Because I never let anyone touch what's mine. The door burst open before they could react. Caleb shoved his way in, eyes wide, rage etched deep into every line of his face. Althea, he shouted, advancing. You think you can run from me? You think I'll just let you? Elias moved faster than Althea's eyes could follow. In one fluid motion, he intercepted Caleb, holding him back with an ease that spoke of centuries of experience. His voice was calm, chilling in its certainty. Stop. Caleb froze. Something about Elias's presence made the air itself seem to tighten. "Ooh, what are you?" he stammered. Elias's gaze was cold, measured, unwavering. "I am someone who will make sure you never hurt her again." Caleb laughed, sharp and brittle. "You don't understand. She's mine. She can't." Althea stepped forward, finally. Her voice was clear, sharp. "She's not yours. I'm not yours. And you will leave. Now." For the first time, Caleb faltered. He looked from her to Elias and back, uncertainty creeping into his eyes. That uncertainty was all Elias needed. With emotion almost too fast to follow, Elias forced Caleb back, pinning him against the wall. There was no violence, no unnecessary cruelty, just power and presence, the kind that left no room for argument. Caleb struggled, but Elias's control was absolute. "You've had your chance," Elias said. "You've had your power, and now it's over." Caleb's face twisted, a mixture of rage and disbelief. "You think you can protect her?" "You don't know, I know," Elias interrupted, voice steady. "I know everything I need to know. You're not getting another chance." Althea watched, her chest tight with adrenaline, as the man who had haunted her life for so long shrank under the certainty of Elias's presence. For the first time, she realized she didn't need to be afraid. Not of Caleb, not of anyone. Caleb was finally subdued, trapped in a moment of vulnerability that he had never experienced. His threats dissolved into nothingness, his arrogance stripped away by the quiet authority of someone who refused to be intimidated. "You can leave," Elias said finally, and the words weren't a suggestion, they were a command. "And never come back." Caleb's eyes flicked to Althea one last time, a storm of resentment and desperation. But he knew. He could feel it in the air, in Elias's presence, in the sheer force of protection surrounding her. He stumbled backward, muttering threats that no longer carried weight, and finally left. The door shut. Silence settled over the apartment again, this time different from before. This silence was complete, unbroken, final. Althea sank to the floor, breathing hard, and Elias crouched beside her, one arm around her shoulders. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, or something like it. Time felt slower, deeper. "Safe. You did it," she whispered. "No," he said softly. "You did it. You survived. You stood up. You reclaimed yourself. I just made sure he couldn't stop you." Tears streamed down Althea's face. Relief, rage, exhaustion, and something tender, something she had thought long dead, flooded her at once. She felt the weight of years lift, piece by piece. Elias pulled back slightly, brushing her hair from her face. "And now," he said, voice low, intimate, "you can start living." The words struck her in a way nothing else ever had. Living, truly living, was something she had almost forgotten. Not hiding, not surviving in silence, not fearing her own name. Living meant choice, love, freedom. And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life with Elias. Not just safety, but connection, warmth, trust. A life where her heart could beat openly, unafraid. She looked into his eyes, dark and infinite, and saw the reflection of her own hope. A fragile thing, yes, but real. And she reached for it, daring to take it. I think I can," she said, voice trembling. Elias's lips curved into a smile, tender and certain. "You already are." They stayed like that for a long moment, the storm outside finally breaking, rain pattering against the windows in a soothing rhythm. The world was no longer a threat. It was just them, the night, and the promise of something new. Althea pressed her hand against his chest, feeling the quiet, enduring strength beneath. "Thank you," she whispered. "No," Elias said softly, fingers brushing her cheek. "Thank you for letting me protect you." The night passed in quiet intimacy. They didn't need words. Every touch, every glance, every shared breath said what words could not. And when Althea finally drifted into sleep, it was without fear, without shadows. Only the steady certainty of protection and the first stirring of love that promised to endure. By morning, the town outside was washed clean by the rain, streets glistening with possibility. And Althea Whitmore stepped forward, not as a victim, not as someone hiding, but as someone who had survived, reclaimed herself, and dared to love. For the first time in her life, she was truly free. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. It really means a lot that you spent some time here with me today. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, drop a comment, or share it with someone who might enjoy it too. And don't forget to follow/subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. I love hearing from you. So let me know your thoughts, questions, or just say hi in the comments. Thanks again. You're the reason I do this, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.